I think the hardest part of writing a cosy for me is actually creating characters that could be suspects, because you've always got to
Yes.
have people who are suspicious and they're not necessarily nice characters.
Hello and welcome to Ray of Light, a podcast about writing, reading and happiness. I'm your host, Eleanor Ray, and I write uplifting book club fiction, stories about finding light in darker times. If you love a classic cosy mystery, think glamorous 1920s parties, charming seaside towns, and just the occasional murder, then you're going to love today's guest. She's the author of several hugely enjoyable mystery series, including the Fenchurch Mysteries and the much-loved Cressida Fawcett Mysteries, which transport readers to the sparkling world of the 1920s. Her books combine classic Golden Age mystery with warmth, wit, and characters you quickly grow to care about. And now she's launching a brand new series set in Cornwall, beginning with Murder in a Cornish Tea Shop, which introduces a delightful new sleuthing duo and plenty of seaside secrets. I'm so pleased to welcome cozy crime author Fliss Chester. Hello, thank you so much for being with us today. It's a real treat. And we have known each other for a few years now, haven't we? We've crossed paths at various crime writing festivals. So it's really nice that you're now here with me on the podcast.
No, absolutely delighted. Thank you for having me.
I've been really enjoying your new book, recently launched, Murder in a Cornish Tea Shop, and it's a brand new series. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yes, of course. So yeah, Murder in a Cornish Tea Shop is the start of a new series. In my head, I'm calling it the Maddie Penrose Mysteries series.
Love that.
I'm not sure that's the official title yet, but as you can probably guess, Maddie Penrose is my new main character. She's a sort of chef, but I think chef's quite a fancy word for her. She's been working in London, slightly burnt out, comes down to Cornwall to go and have some R&R with her grandmother, who happens to own a lovely farm called Folly Farm, which has a tea shop. And so Maddie says, well, I'm going to come and help you with a tea shop, Gran. And although it's that sort of lovely dynamic of she thinks she's coming down to help her grandmother, but actually it's the rest of recuperation she needs from a busy life in London. And of course, once she's down at the tea shop, in normal life, she's thinking about bringing on this tea shop and how she can include her wonderful chefiness into maybe getting a little bit more on the menu than just cake and scones. But then, of course, in cozy crime world, murders happen.
Of course. Yes, I love it. And I love it starting with her feeling burnt out and kind of a newcomer to this location. In my last book, See the Stars, I start with burnout. And I think that gives you, for a start, it's something that I think a lot of people can really connect with. That sensation of kind of doing something that just becomes so hard and so much work. And
Yeah.
it's a great way to start a novel, I think, as well, because it's someone who needs something. Do you think that was something that played a part when you came
I
up with the
I
idea?
think so, and also that idea of new beginnings. So
Yes, absolutely.
I think it's nice for the reader to start at a new beginning for Maddie. So yes, she's burnt out, and her London life sort of provides a backdrop to to her character and to what she's been through. And there's the odd sort of discussion of what she's left behind. But actually, the adventure starts with you right now here as we start the first page, and here she is embarking on the first day at the tea shop, and so we're all fresh in this adventure together. And I think that's a really lovely way, I think, of starting a series, and probably maybe subconsciously why I chose someone who did have that new start, new vigor about her at starting something exciting.
Yes, absolutely. And you write wonderful cozy crime stories. I really enjoy them. What do you think it is about cozy crime in particular that readers love so much?
Oh, I mean, what isn't there to love? I mean, it's got maybe what it lacks in sort of thrills and gore. I think it more than makes up for in this wonderful, comforting world. I think there's a
Yes.
very phrase that, well, it's not really a phrase, but an idea that the the comforting world is where you start in a cozy crime. You set the scene. In my books, we've now got this lovely coastal small town and beautiful beaches and cliffs and everything. Then that's disrupted by a murder. But it's not it's mostly off the page. Some of mine's a little bit on the page, but it's mostly off the page. There's a bit of excitement, a bit of thrills, but it's all done in this wonderfully wrapped up cozy world. And then at the end, justice is served and we all go back to our comfort world again. So you are able as a reader to let yourself go into this world knowing that you're not going to be upset in any way or traumatized. It's not going to be a book you're going to have to put down and go, oh God, I need a moment. I think with a cozy crime, readers can anticipate what they're going to get. There are rules about writing cozies, and I think as writers, we try and stick to those as much as possible, adding our own flair and storylines and things. But I think that's the key to it, is keeping it this comforting world that readers feel cosseted by and are happy to
Yes.
enjoy their time in, even though there is obviously something as traumatic as murder, but it's sort of dealt with in a much more comfortable puzzle solving way.
Exactly. And I think puzzle solving is really key to that. It's a world where we feel safe and something unsettling happens, but then it's all about bringing it to justice and resolving it and
Yeah,
figuring out what happened.
yeah,
You mentioned cozy crime rules. What do you think the secrets are to writing a good cozy crime? Any
yeah.
tips?
I think you can get very bogged down in the kind of the rules of cozies and
Hmm.
the aspect that some readers will have come to and want, and will criticise you if you don't have, too much in the way of beautiful scenery, pets and animals that help solve the crime, all that sort of thing. But I think you just have to find your own way into what kind of cozy you want to write. And if you're sitting down now thinking yourself you wanted to write a cozy, I suppose you would naturally be thinking that, because that's if you're thinking, I want to set it on a lovely setting, I want to find a lovely cast of characters who are really warm to each other. I think the hardest part of writing a cozy for me is actually creating characters that could be suspects, because you've always got to
Yes.
have people who are suspicious, and they're not necessarily nice characters. So sometimes you get an editorial note and editor will say, could you make everyone a little bit more likable? I'm like, well, they are suspects and one of them
Understood.
is a murderer. So there's that's the sort of, like, one of the hardest things about cozies actually, is keeping it all very soft and gentle when sometimes the characters that you're wanting to portray aren't necessarily,
Yes.
they've got motives for murder. So, and even if they're not murderers, they might have the red herring things that are going about them, maybe might make them, fraudsters or con men or something. I think humour's important. I think there's a lot of humour in
You
cozies.
do that. You write humor very well. Your books are very funny. One other thing I loved about your books is the settings. They're very vivid, and you've written in a lot of different settings in the past, set in the past, in fact. How important do you think setting is to you when you're writing a mystery?
For me, I think it's probably one of the most important things. Don't laugh, but I think plot comes last.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
I'm not inspired by plots. I'm inspired by places, and
Interesting.
atmosphere and things. So my 1920s series was hugely inspired by the fact that I had been an interior designer and loved interior design and had studied the history and the social history of English country houses back when I was an undergraduate and then an interior design diploma. So for me, the settings of inside large country houses were integral to the stories, and actually how you could use the houses. How many secret tunnels might there be in a Scottish castle? What's the weight of the curtains in a ballroom in an English stately home? What's the position of somewhere? Is it on the cliff tops? Is it deep in the countryside? Can it be isolated from outside police help and that sort of thing? So I think the setting and the place, both for historical cozy crime dramas like my 1920s series, but also bringing it into the modern day and choosing Cornwall as a location for my new series, where again you've got this, it sort of leaps off the page. So I think sort of place and buildings and villages are, to me, one of the most important parts of setting a cozy. And then the plot will come from that. What might happen to somebody in a tea shop, or what might happen to somebody in a Scottish castle.
I think maybe it's especially true with cozies because they're very escapist, aren't they? And to have something that's successfully escapist, you need to really transport people, which I think you do in your writing. That's so interesting. Now, you mentioned your other mysteries there. Could you tell us a little bit more about Fenchurch and Cressida Fawcett? For anyone who hasn't discovered them yet, maybe tell us what we could expect.
Of course, yeah. So Fenchurch, the running joke in those books was that she was called Fenella Church and calls herself Fenchurch, and everyone says, just like the London station. She's like, yes. She was my first foray into, I'd say, cozy crime. I'd say it's almost historical noir. They're not quite as cozy as the next series, but that she's 1940s. She's a land girl, so she worked on the land during the Second World War, having a relationship with a young man who went to France. And the book starts with her receiving a letter, a coded letter, and she realises that they shared a love of crosswords, and actually he's giving her a code within this letter that she has to work out. And I think for me that again tied in her love of crosswords, the character's love of crosswords, and my love of crosswords. It ties in with that sort of cosy crime feel of puzzles, and actually there are little puzzles to be solved. If you look at the whole mystery as if you were filling in a crossword puzzle, you might not be able to get it straight away, but once you've got your 3 down and your 5 down, you can then get your 2 across. And that, to me, my puzzling mind loved that idea. So I wove that into the 3 books of that series. So that's 1940s, post Second World War.
I love that especially because when you have cozy mysteries, you don't normally have a professional person solving the crimes. It's an amateur. And it's great when they have a special skill that means they're good at it. And so your crossword thing is
Yes.
great. You've got that kind of
Yeah.
puzzling element, which is really,
And
really fun.
And actually, each of my female amateur sleuths have all got that aspect about them, because exactly as you say, they can't really be professionals. I mean, you can. There is obviously TV series where you have sort of private detectives and things doing it. But for me, it was what's their way in? If they're not investigative journalists, why are they so interested in solving puzzles? So Fenchurch loved her cryptic crossword puzzles. Cressida Fawcett, that's the 1920s. She's a high society, which to my mind was brilliant, because high society equals being invited to country houses for parties. So that was her in to all these different lovely places. And she, much like my background, was very interested in interior design. So for her way of solving mysteries was, what looks wrong here? What's different? Has that rug moved from the last time I saw it? And if you've got an eye, I said this about her, you've got an eye for a design, you've got an eye for a crime. So
I love that.
What can you spot that's wrong? Why does this room that has been so elegantly put together now suddenly the day after the murder look different? So that was another way of cluing in the sleuth to the mystery. And in the most recent one, she's a chef. So she looks at ideas like a recipe. So she puts her notes together as if she's building up, and she'll often compare different witnesses, the suspects, as she goes and interviews, compares their stories, and she says, like those different recipes, you'll have 3 different recipes for chocolate brownies. What's different in those? Why is that different from what they've said to what they've said? So I think finding these ins and giving a reader a plausible explanation as to why this amateur sleuth is good at sleuthing, what they've got that makes them be able to just look up from the newspaper and say, oh, well, there's a murder. And what gives them an edge perhaps over even the police, and especially over the other people in that environment they're in. Yeah, so I think that's probably, along with place, I think finding the backstory and the background to your amateur sleuth is probably like the second most important thing for writing cozies.
Interesting. Now, you haven't always written cozy crimes, have you? Can you tell us a little bit about your writing journey?
Of course, yeah. So I started writing romance. And I think this wasn't a term back then when I started writing, but now I think they'd call them spicy romances. So they're quite saucy. I was hugely inspired by Julie Cooper when I was growing up, and I started writing because I'd always wanted to be a novelist, but had never thought I could be. But I thought, well, let's just give it a go. So I started writing, and I suppose the genre I was reading then, the genre I was most interested in, the one that I found most accessible to get into was romance. I was in my 20s, I was going skiing with friends, living in London, and so I started writing this book, which was basically about that. And it was fun, and it was unfettered, and I loved it. And
please tell us your original title, because I love it.
So the title that it was published under is Snowballs. The title
which is brilliant in itself.
Which is fun. The title I first gave it was Alpine Horn, which I had one publishing executive say to me that sounded a little bit too much like a carry-on film for it to be taken seriously. And I said the whole point is it shouldn't be taken seriously. Yes. It's a fun thing. I love the fact they did call it Snowballs. They were going to just call it Winter Fun on the Slopes, which is one of those,
very boring.
yeah, I'm going to say meh titles that sometimes publishers come up with. So I fought for Snowballs to stay on there, and
Snowballs.
and if only Alpine Horn could have stayed, but
One day.
one
One
day,
day,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You published your first romance novel.
Yes. So, and actually, that was the
So
first
no
book
books.
I ever wrote. I took it. I had it as a draft in draft form, and that was the book that I was writing while I was attending creative writing classes. And I'm sure other authors have spoken about this, about their sort of route to publication. Mine was that I realised I hadn't had any writing tutoring since leaving school. I mean, and probably even since leaving junior school, do we get taught to write creatively? So I signed myself up for some creative writing lessons. Now, lots of people, I think that we both know, have done very serious MA courses. And mine was in a back room in a pub in Balham, but it was brilliant. And I had this draft for Snowballs, and I was taking it there. It was the first time I read my work out loud. First time I had it constructively criticised. All the things that you'd do in a sort of very smart MA course was happening at the pub in Balham opposite the Waitrose car park. So, I had this manuscript, and I had also worked in magazines. I had a long stint working in magazines while I was writing that book, and I had a great friend who worked in book publishing, and I always thought to myself, I don't want to abuse my friendship by saying, here's a book I've written, help me get published. But I did say to her, so I've got this draft. I know, being an editor myself, the power of editorial, how important it is to edit. For me, it was features for magazines, but manuscripts. Do you know anyone who can help me edit this bit? I'll pay them. I just need someone to edit it, and then I'm going to self-publish it. And I know it's a little bit silly, but I need it to be the best silliness it can be before I self-publish. And so my friend who worked in book publishing, she said, "Yep, sure. Do you remember so and so who we used to go out drinking with?" I thought, "Oh yeah, she's lovely." And so I contacted her, and we worked together. And I paid her, and she was a fantastic freelance editor, and we really worked on that manuscript. And she sent me off on sort of it wasn't just editing. She said, "Fliss, go and watch some of those old black and white films, the romance films. Go and see analyse the beats and see what point the relationship turns. And those old black and white love stories are basically what every other love story has been based on. So just go and watch a couple of those on a Sunday afternoon and then come back to your manuscript." So, it was a fantastic editorial process. And at the end of it, she said, "Look, I think this is actually too good for you to self-publish." And there's no shade on anyone who self-publishes, because I have done since. But she said, "I think you should try and get yourself an agent." And she actually knew someone who was taking on new clients. So I did end up being taken on by her, Emily, who's still my agent 10 years later. And she got me a 3-book deal with Orion 2 weeks later. So it went from that sort of absolute, this is just my hobby, this is just my book, I'm sort of taking it semi-seriously, to boom, 3 books.
What was the best moment, do you think? Was it when she said you should try and get an agent, getting an agent, or getting that 3-book deal? Or was it just a series of wonderful moments?
We know we always set the goalpost, don't we? Well, after you've achieved one thing, you set the goalpost for something else. But I think it was that moment. I remember walking down the Strand in London, having been at Orion's offices, and phoning my mum and saying, "Mum, I've done it. I've got a book deal." And that was a dream come true. That was something that, I think every author's in that position when you get your first book deal. I mean, it didn't pay very much. The books have now all gone out of print and have sunk without a trace. But it was still that moment that I could say those words out loud. And I think that was probably it's the point I most remember about the whole journey.
Wonderful. It's a brilliant moment. My first book deal was very, very small, because I used to write cozy crime like you a
I loved
while
your
ago now.
cozies.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago now, under a different name. But yes, it was that moment of finding out that you were going to be published that was the best. And it wasn't really about the money at that point for me.
No.
I was doing it in my spare time it was kind of a hobby that had been validated rather than anything else. But yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah,
It's a wonderful moment.
Yeah.
And you can have a lot of ups and downs afterwards, as we all have.
Yeah.
But yeah, no one takes that moment away.
No. Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, we've talked about your romance novels. Do you think that influenced how you write your cozy crime? Because you do have, like, you have some lovely little romances going on in the background. Can you tell
I
me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's really important actually to have a mix of both. I found
Mm.
how I got into writing crime was that after getting that 3 book deal, so having spent about, I don't know, 10 years probably writing the first romance and then suddenly having to write another two really quickly for this deal, I was writing those and I was like, right, okay, how do I get the plot? What do I do? I want this love story to continue over these 3 books, but there needs to be some meat to these stories. What peril is this poor girl getting herself into that this romantic hero has to keep rescuing her from? Or why do they keep breaking up? Who's the sexy guy who's coming to interrupt it? And of course that sort of goes hand in hand with dodgy dealings. So,
Yes.
the second romance book was set in a vineyard and there was a guy who was fraudulently doing things with wine, and the third romance was based on the Riviera and there was this big billionaire on a yacht and he was obviously, a bad guy underneath. So I found myself bringing crime into my romances as a plot device, as some
Interesting.
meat
So
to
it
the
happened
bones.
really organically.
Yeah, and then I think when I started then saying to myself, well, actually, I really want to write crime, it felt very natural to bring romance into it because, again,
Hmm.
that's the other half of the coin. So bringing romance into crime books, for me, A, adds to their coziness, adds to the sort of lovely feel that you're reading something more than just a murder. And it feels very natural, I think.
I feel the same because as I said, I wrote cozy crimes, and then when I wrote my first non-cozy crime, which is Everything is Beautiful,
Mm,
I knew what my character was going to be. I knew it was going to be a hoarder, and I knew I wanted her to discover something underneath her possessions. So it was her possessions that were kind of hiding what had caused her to be a hoarder in the first place. And then I thought, the plot, I want mystery. I don't want
mm,
to write something that doesn't have a mystery in it. I sometimes find them a bit boring to read. So yeah, I made it an investigation. So it was semi-mystery, but also very much coming from the character rather than anything else. And then I had a romantic subplot because I thought I want part of her recovery to be being open to a new romance because I think it's a sign of kind of
yeah,
character development and
yeah,
things like that as well as the
yeah.
romance
And I
itself.
think that was such a beautiful story. And I think because you
Well,
brought in
thank
those
you.
elements of mystery and romance, and obviously her desperately sad backstory,
Mm.
gave it such a lovely, well-rounded feeling as a book. You got so many different. You had a full character there, not just a two-dimensional. Well, I'm just going to solve a murder, or I'm just going to have a romance.
Thank you. No, I really enjoyed writing that book, I have to say. And you also write lovely characters, and they're always people that we care about. And certainly your main character in the Cornish Tea Shop, I wanted to hang out with her. Right, moving away from our books for a moment, can you tell me about something that you've read that you love? Maybe something that isn't a bestseller yet.
Again, I was sort of thinking about this, and we're very lucky and we get to read ARCs and proof copies of our friends' books, and I do love them, and I think they're all fantastic. But it kept popping into my head a book that I read, and this is not a new book. This is in fact a very, very old book, but I'm not sure if it's a particularly well-known book outside of its fan base. And it's actually a book that was hugely inspirational to me, partly for my Cressida Fawcett series, partly for another book that I'm sort of noodling away in the back of my mind. And it's The Diary of a Provincial Lady by E.M. Delafield. It was written in the 1930s. It's been republished multiple times. In fact, it was one of those lovely ones. The books that have the beautiful covers, and they're sort of all different. There was one of those ones. And I think that's why I picked it up, because it looks so beautiful. And I started reading it. And I thought to myself, is this a satire? Is this a modern satire? Because there are parts of it's written like a diary. It's written as if there's this lovely country lady who is writing her diary. She's more obsessed about her hyacinth bulbs not coming up, and her husband's always got his head stuck in the newspaper, and the children are at school, and the French nanny comes and says things in French, and it's a very sort of gentle world. But actually, some of her characterizations are so incisive. I mean, I was really thinking this could definitely be a satire on our modern social world. And I had to double check that I wasn't being hoodwinked. No, definitely E.M. Delafield writing in the 1930s. It's so is of its time, but it's also so up to date and modern. And it just gives this window, this vignette into a provincial life, but someone who's probably upper middle class. She goes up to London to go and buy hats, and it's just beautiful. It's beautifully written. It's beautifully constructed. I don't think enough people have heard of her as a writer, and I think it should be championed more by.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'll have a look at that. Now, moving away from books even for a moment, what else do you enjoy? What else brings you happiness in life?
Well, no surprise, having talked about my Cressida Fawcett series, that I love interior design. That was
Yes.
something that I studied post-grad as well. So a huge interest in that. But I think when I need time away from books, I'll often find myself with a Farrow and Ball colour chart and wondering what room I can paint next in the house. And creatively, I've really got into recently creatively painting furniture. And
Ooh.
I find that because we use our hands to type and our brains to think creative. I think because writing is such a inherent part of me now, I don't feel like that actually satisfies me creatively as much anymore.
Oh, interesting.
And maybe it's
Yeah.
the books that I write and the sort of series nature of them, but I feel like I need to do something else very sort of traditionally creative, like painting. I'm not an artist. I'm not sort of someone who can suddenly have an art show. I'm not talented like that, but painting furniture, studying the beautiful painted interiors of Sweden and trying to recreate that. I'm probably tell I'm in this lovely old cottage. It's a beautiful, sort of 450-year-old cottage, and I just want to just paint it, like not just one coat of paint, but the little designs on the beams and I don't know, there's that sort of thing. Anyway, that's my little away from writing.
Lovely. I think that's the most interesting answer I've had, actually. It's really lovely. Right. What's coming up next? Apart from interior design and painting little drawings on your
Yes.
walls, what are you going to be writing next, or what can we look forward to coming out soon?
So yesterday was the publication day for Murder in a Cornish Tea Shop that we've discussed.
Yes.
Very hot on its tail. It's the second book in the series, Murder in a Cornish Book Club, and that's coming out at the end of June. So I've already written that one. It's in its final stages of editorial at the moment, and that's got its publication date. While I'm doing that, I'm also writing the first draft of book 3 in the Maddie Penrose series, which haven't got a title yet, but it's going to be a sort of a very wintry, almost Christmas style, probably surrounding a lovely Cornish Christmas market in the farmyard. And then I've got another 2 books contracted after that. So that will take me through till next year. So yeah, that'll be 5 books in sort of quick succession over the next, 18 months, a year, 18 months.
Lovely.
And as I say, I'm sort of noodling something in the background, but I haven't got time to do it.
Lots of Maddie to look forward to, it sounds. That's
Yeah,
excellent
lots of
news.
Maddie and her cats, Burn, Toast and Crumpet. They are.
Yes, I love the cats. Can I just give a little moment for the cats? Do you have any catty inspiration
I
for
do.
them? Any feline inspiration?
I have a burn Toast, or Toast as he's called, is based off my cat Smokey, who is a very good mouser. And in fact, the more squeamish listeners might not want to know that I just picked up a dead mouse from under the kitchen table just before coming on here, because he has what they call a very high prey drive. And so yeah, he is my ragamuffin, big fluffy grey Toast, and I've always wanted a cat called Crumpet. And I think if these books do well, come on, listeners, if we can get these books to do well, my husband said I can get a ginger kitten, so then I can have Crumpet and Toast.
Sing.
So yeah, they are. My editor, she's so funny. She loves cats as well, and she says, Fliss, no one writes cats like you do. You can you know what they do. They look at you, they silently meow at you, all that sort of thing.
Yes. Oh, I love cats. I'd love to have a
Yeah.
cat. Maybe
Yeah.
one day I'll live vicariously through
Yes.
Maddie for the moment.
Yes, yeah. Crumpet and Toast will definitely be in all the books. So yeah, that's a definite.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Fliss, and thank you to everyone for listening. So, Murder in a Cornish Tea Shop, the first in her brand new series, is available now. And if you've enjoyed Ray of Light, please do like and subscribe for more. You can find me at Eleanor Ray Books across all the social platforms, and I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you think. And if you've liked what you've heard, maybe you might like what I write as well. It's uplifting book club fiction like Everything is Beautiful and See the Stars, stories that spark deep conversations and find hope in the unexpected. See you next time for more reading, writing, and happiness.